And under those circumstances, that may well be worth abandoning them. It may well be that in the next few decades, the solution to the copyright problem, the death of copyright, is to say, yes, copyright is dead, bury it nicely, and if you're a writer, find indirect ways of getting paid for your writing. Because I think, given a world where intellectual property is largely in digital form, digital property is cheap to copy, and given the existence of the internet, intellectual property is cheap to distribute. And that makes it very hard to enforce intellectual property rules. One of the stories that I like to tell in this context is that around 1900 or so, the great pirate nation of the world was the US, because the US did not have a copyright treaty with Britain. Despite that fact, British authors not uncommonly made more money from US sales than from British sales. And the reason was that with the printing technology of 1900, there was a large first mover advantage, because it was costly and time consuming to set type, hand setting, lead type. So if you were a British author, you contracted with an American publisher who would pay you royalties. You provided him with your work before it was published in Britain. When it was published in Britain, which was the first point at which a pirate could start, he already had books going out of his warehouse to be sold in the bookstores. The result is that the pirate would be 3 weeks or a month behind the legitimate publisher. Often, though not always, the big sales are in the early weeks for a new book. And if a pirate edition came out, the legitimate publisher would then bring out what was called a fighting edition, which was a low-priced edition designed to undercut the pirate, so the pirate would never recover his fixed cost of typesetting on the pirate edition. Worked tolerably well. With that technology, you could enforce intellectual property law without intellectual property law. We are moving to a technology where you can't enforce it even with intellectual property law. And you then have the very interesting question of one alternative is technological enforcement. There are certain kinds of intellectual property which you can just make it impossible to copy. Most obviously, software that's running on a website, not that's being downloaded to the consumer, where the person is paying for access but not for possession. Similarly, access to a database doesn't give you possession of the database. But there are many other kinds of intellectual property, like songs and novels, you just can't do it. And for those, you're going to figure out other ways of getting paid for producing them. But that would be another talk. We're short of time, so give that some other time. I have. Yeah?
Rational self-interest, as I understand it, is explicitly tied to morality. But when you use it, you seem to be talking about people making a moral choice, like running in battle when you're committed to stand.
Yeah, I don't see rational self-interest having anything to do with morality.
Okay, could you explain?
Well, I'm not an objectivist, which I assume is what you are. If you're interested in my view of objectivism, if you go up on my webpage and follow the link to my libertarian stuff, I've got a piece which was originally a Usenet post, which is explaining why I think Rand's derivation of ought from is full of holes. One of the things that really intrigued me when I was first encountering Rand was that it didn't seem to me that I had any way of deriving my moral beliefs. It seemed to me that Hume had I don't know if I'd read Hume at the time, but that Hume's is-ought problem was a real problem. Rand claimed to have solved that problem. She claimed to be able to show from the facts of reality how one ought to act. And I concluded reading it that she hadn't, that it's bogus, that it's full of holes. But you can look at it on the webpage and decide for yourself if I convince you. So no, by rational self-interest, all I mean is that people have objectives and they tend to choose the correct way to achieve those objectives. And I don't. The great advantage of evolutionary biology over economics is that evolutionary biologists know what the utility function is. They know what organisms are trying to achieve. All organisms are as if designed to achieve reproductive success. That was one of the many things Rand got wrong, by the way. She thought that living creatures in general were designed to maintain their own life. That is not true. If it were 200 years ago and you got pregnant, your life expectancy would go down. Because until modern obstetrics, pregnancy was about the most dangerous thing that happened to any large number of people, because for various reasons I won't go into now, human beings are poorly designed to have babies. The result of babies having big heads, basically, and a bunch of constraints. Nonetheless, women kept getting pregnant. Nonetheless, male praying mantises reproduce at the cost of getting eaten by the female. So what organisms are designed to do is to have reproductive success. Staying alive is only a means to that end. So anyway, so that's the neat thing about evolutionary biology is a lot like economics, it turns out. It's just, as I say, they know what the utility function is. They know what organisms are designed to achieve, whereas we just have to say people have objectives. We can look around us and figure out about what those objectives are, but we have no good theory of them. Yes, somebody else? Yes?
So you talk about rational ignorance, and there have been some successful attempts to minimize the cost of informed voting. For instance, the NRA's report card on politicians, the transfer, the re-ratings, and so on. And now it's feasible with information technology to generalize that to all politicians, all issues, to minimize the cost of informed voting.
But notice that if people are paying attention to those ratings, there is then an incentive for people to try to alter the ratings rather than try to alter the real behavior. That it's like the general problem with the Libertarian Party, which is that if the Libertarian Party ever really starts getting a lot of votes, it'll stop being libertarian. Because as long as a party doesn't have enough votes to sell, all right, if you get enough votes so that people will pay you money to support them, then you have a problem. If you don't, the only real asset the LP has is ideological libertarians who would like to give it money or work for it. As long as that's its only asset, the party is going to stay more or less libertarian. But if it were in a situation where getting 10% of the vote instead of 5% meant $15 million from corporate contributors or any other contributors, very rapidly it would get taken over by professionals who understood the business of maximizing income and votes and would then become useless. Now, I made this point a long, long time ago. I think in some talk where Ed Clark was present. He was not too happy when I described the Libertarian Party as sort of like a throwaway soda bottle, that it's functional, and it will be very nice if it gets up to 10%, but if it gets up 10%, it's then going to no longer serve our purposes anymore. Right, I'm out of time. So it's time.